Hello, I'm Alan Dedman, a British artist. I live and work in the United Kingdom. Today I want to look at and question the perceived wisdom which says anything presented as such that isn't man-made must be deemed art. We will also be hearing from David Cockney, an artist living and working in London's East End. The Second World War saw humanity engage in a righteous struggle against the evils of fascism. The germ of fascist ideology consists in a society finding reason to reject an aspect of itself, proscribing or not allowing the customs, behaviours and characteristics of a rejected political outgroup. In the UK, the popular TV series Big Brother uses this for entertainment within the microcosm of the Big Brother house, so audiences passively accept the idea. Increasingly, worldwide media focuses on the undesirability and fallibility of men. In the UK, for example, all media references to crime and criminality are in the male gender. Women don't commit crimes here, it would seem, except Myra Hindley, of course. Punitive measures applied now to correct the wrongs of the past, will they work? My ancestors were enslaved by the Roman Empire, as were all the people of this country. Would it make things better to demand retribution from Italy or erase all things Italian from society? I'm boycotting pasta. Freedom of speech is being throttled by political correctness. Collective behaviour on social media bears all the hallmarks of fascism. In the arts, supplanting anything male with something female because perceived wisdom says we must is truly idiotic. I studied fine art painting at the Royal Academy Schools in London. The schools were established in 1769 by Sir Joshua Reynolds to provide training and education for artists. The person in charge of the Royal Academy Schools, once known as the Keeper, now aggrandised to Curator, has included both male and female incumbents. In 2006, Eliza Bonham Carter wended her way into the Keeper's office, bearing a double-barrelled surname likely to be found in Debrett's Peerage, that's a telephone directory of posh people, no doubt eased Miss Bonham Carter's passage into the role. It will be far harder for someone like myself. Miss Bonham Carter says of her job, it's like turning a tanker around, effecting what she assumes are required changes to the curriculum at the Royal Academy Schools. But the question it arises, who said the tanker needs to be turned around in the first place? Or is it just the vain fancy of someone who needs to make their mark for the sake of the family name? The Royal Academy has always been the engine room of drawing in the UK. Up until recent times, this has been effected by mandatory life drawing, that's drawing the nude, a classical discipline. But perceived wisdom now says this is old-fashioned, born of the patriarchy, and so on. However, without championing classical procedure in the fine arts, there are literally no pricks to kick against. I've always believed artists should learn the stuff of classicism before choosing to reject or build upon it. Would it be a good thing if the Royal Academy of Music were to abandon classical procedure so students might focus on rap, grime or grunge? Probably not. But that's the visual arts equivalent of what is being wrought at the Royal Academy. Back to the year zero. In 2011, the celebrated female artist Tracey Emin was appointed to the role of Professor of Drawing at the Royal Academy Schools, a pseudo-academic position for a role which doesn't compare to the work of the professors I know. Tracey Emin, for all her worldly success, has never been known for her drawing ability. In fact, she went to America to take drawing lessons before she assumed responsibility for teaching the subject. And if that isn't a telltale sign as to Miss Emin's unsuitability for the task, then what is? This is an example of one of my own drawings made at the Royal Academy Schools. And this is an example of Tracey Emin's drawing. Miss Emin, though she is a professor of drawing, repeatedly avoids her models' faces. The people who back her might argue this is making a statement about female identity. In my experience, novices tend to avoid drawing facial features because it's difficult. For classical art buffs, it's interesting to note in the head and face we have the greatest coalescence of the phi ratio across the human form. A type of semi-mathematics, because the ratio allows for error, the phi ratio or sacred geometry should be addressed in any drawing curriculum, and regular practice of life drawing sharpens awareness of this. I expect Tracey Emin will know all about it. But we should ask ourselves, just because Tracey Emin is a successful female artist, is she really able to deliver cutting-edge tuition in drawing? Could she elicit the sort of response from her charges now as Norman Blamey did from myself? And is the feminine tryst at the Royal Academy Schools really for the greater good of the country, or are we just being shortchanged again for the sake of political idealism? A London-based artist I know has very strong opinions about such matters. Here, David Cockney expresses himself with eloquence.
Afternoon. My name is David Cockney, not to be confused with that other geezer what comes from up north, going by a similar moniker. Now I want to talk to you about something that's very dear to my heart. Drawing. Now I've always believed that somebody who can draw is actually good at art, right? Now recently I heard that there Tracey Emin, whatever she's fucking called, has been made top dog at fucking drawing at the Royal Academy, right? And I thought to myself, hang on a minute, right? Isn't that bird known for not making her bed or something? So how the fuck is she going to teach these youngsters how to wield a fucking pencil when really what she does is wield knickers? Yeah. Think about it, right? There is a prize at the Royal Academy, right, called the Eric Kennington Prize for drawing. Now, can you imagine it? How the students are going to go about doing that these days, seeing as Tracey Emin is their teacher. You know, you'll get Brian, chucks his fucking Y-fronts down on the floor, don't he? Look like the fucking starting grid at Brands Hatch or something. Because he had a duff biryani and one too many pints of lager and cycled across London before he commenced on unmaking his own bed. But of course, never mind all the urban sweat and strain that the gusset of his Y-fronts portrays. He will be outdone by Felicity. Because Felicity will present an only slightly sullied pair of Marks and Spencer's knickers. And she will win the Eric Kennington Prize for drawing because of the nuanced marks therein. And this will portray far greater urban stress on the part of Felicity compared to Brian and his self-inflicted distress with his biryani and lager. So of fucking course, the Eric Kennington Prize for drawing goes to Felicity. Fuck Brian, he doesn't matter. Well, that's what they think anyway. But if that's how people are going to make drawings, don't it worry you? Ain't it a little bit of a problem? Because at the end of the fucking day, they ought to be able to draw properly in the first place. Never mind their dirty underwear and their unmade fucking beds. It's all bollocks. That's what I think. It's a load of fucking bollocks.
Yes, perhaps a bit coarse in his delivery, but Mr. Cockney has a point. Just exactly what sort of skills does Tracey Emin impart to her charges, given that drawing isn't really her forte? Personally, I don't think this is good enough. I don't care how famous or wealthy Miss Emin is, or how much of a woman she is. In my opinion, she's not up to the job of Professor of Drawing at the Royal Academy Schools. In 1968, a woman called Valerie Solanas published this, the Scum Manifesto. That's the sort of Christmas present I get these days, in which she calls for the abolition of the male sex. And I quote, "The elimination of any male is therefore a righteous and good act, highly beneficial to women." In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler said, "The ultimate goal must definitely be the removal of the Jews altogether." Ms. Solanas goes on to say, "The few remaining men in the world can go off to the nearest friendly suicide centre where they will be painlessly gassed to death." Now, where have we heard that before? Valerie Solanas also says, "The farthest out male, in her opinion, is the drag queen." Now, Grayson is another celebrated lovey in the art world. He gained notoriety by winning the Turner Prize in 2003. His creative gimmick being the presentation of himself as a transvestite potter. Accessing his female side, apparently, Perry's artistic output is deemed more valid than any of his straight male counterparts. If we consider the implications of this, we head into the morass of gender identity, a cash cow which Perry is milking to death. Once again, the question it arises, just because something isn't presented as being man-made, does that make it art? Grayson discusses people who refute conditioned gender with an argument based on anthropology, concluding he prefers a slapdash style of building because that is the way of a peaceful tribe. But I know he lives in a brick house. You got to walk your talk, Grayson. Some people are uncertain about their sexuality, and wearing clothes made for the opposite sex is their way of coping. I regularly witnessed a tranny walking up and down the country lane where my studio was at one time. And we believe this chap chose to wear his mother's wardrobe after she died because it was his way of retaining her and his memory of her. But he wasn't cross-dressing for social effect or pandering to the whims of fashion. I know this because I spoke with him. Transvestitism is nothing new. In another studio of mine, I found newspapers from 1961 which feature an article about a local transvestite. Grayson Perry has used his cross-dressing as a marketing gimmick to get himself noticed. So I wondered if wearing a skirt might increase the value of my own work. Perry comes out with a whole fashion vista for the modern man, prescribing jeans and t-shirts with logos, reserving leather jackets for bona fide bikers, etc. He says he gets a lot more attention from women if he's wearing a dress. Now, I've never needed to do that to get similar results. Perhaps he just lacks old-fashioned sex appeal. And now Perry sees fit to lecture mankind about the perceived ills of an entire sex. What gets me is Perry fails to acknowledge all the great things men have done and the sanity masculine behaviour can impart to society. For example, I know a labourer who's had a very hard life. He's a doting father, a single parent, possibly the kind of male Perry would consign to the scrap heap. But this chap's contribution to society is as positive as that of any glamourpuss from Tinseltown. Perry rails against almost all aspects of men and masculinity in a lopsided, myopic fashion. Considering his modus operandi, I can't help but think the battle he chooses to join was begun at home with his father and brother. Like Valerie Solanas and the feminine tryst at the RA schools, he identifies the same undesirable political outgroup. He perpetually grinds an axe against white heterosexual males, apportioning all blame upon them. Born of metropolitan London, art school and the shitty scramble up the greasy pole of success, Perry seeks to overturn something and supplants it with his own. It's just cock mentality in another guise. For all his posing, he is a white and generally heterosexual male in a conventional marriage. He criticises the men's movement and yet shows no inclination to engage or empathise with it. Personally, I joined a men's group in London in the 90s and have subsequently formed my own. In running men's yoga sessions, we create a space in which males can take up the assumedly feminine activity of yoga. In our classes, men hold hands, chant and do group work. They willingly surrender themselves to the task of self-improvement and affirmation of their own sex. It's not what you say, it's what you do that matters. In his opening gambit for his book, Perry recalls a situation where he discovers a father and son at loggerheads during a cycle ride. He tries to intervene unsuccessfully and concludes by virtue signalling his wife about the need for psychotherapy. Grayson Perry is not a father to a son, and as such knows little about the emotional interplay going on between dads and lads. He chooses a negative example of male interaction rather than looking at some of the very positive things that take place between fathers and sons, or males generally. It's arrogant of Perry to assume he knows better, looking down his well-powdered nose at these people. Did he consider what might have been going on before he happened upon them? A friend of mine would have used his own cycling prowess to alter the scene. But Nigel is one of those spindly old gits of the sport who Perry eschews in favour of metrosexual mountain biking. If we look hard within the pages of his book, we find Grayson Perry exudes a kind of sexism against his own sex. Nowhere does he find fault with women or their ways. But if you've lived with women, you will know they're far from perfect. Perry's narrative doesn't discuss how men might equip themselves to cope with some of the ugly and unfair behaviours of women. In recent years, Clementine Ford in Australia has repeatedly said, "Kill all men," and a French woman, Pauline Harmange, is allowed to publish a booklet titled "Why I Hate Men." Both are hate crimes and the perpetrators should be prosecuted and punished. But for some reason, the world stands idly by as it did once before. It's this passivity which we need to combat. In the visual arts in this country, we have the National Portrait Award announcing its first all-female lineup of finalists. But I don't think there's ever been an all-male lineup. Anyway, BP sponsors the award. That makes it dirty money, don't you know, ladies? I suggest we don't acquiesce, don't sponsor, buy or admire cultural produce which is presented as such just because it isn't created or authored by men. That's not good enough reason to applaud or support it. Whatever your sexual orientation, race, creed or politics, all men, boys and the women who love them should stand shoulder to shoulder against the excesses of feminism and do their best to create a balanced and fair society for themselves as well as others. And finally, just because he matters, once again, his good old David Cockney.
Now the reason why modern art is bollocks is because it don't represent nothing, does it? Everybody tells you that it's deep and it's meaningful. Well, in fact, I can't see fuck all in these modern art paintings, I really can't. I don't know why these fuckers can't paint straightforward pictures of real life things. Like, you know, flowers or the nude. Because let's face it, the nude is what it's supposed to be about. Not all this fucking consternation of paint that you get these expressionistic so-and-so's doing. It's such bollocks, I tell you, it's such fucking bollocks, and they pay millions for it. Oh, search me. I reckon a packet of Harry Rags is more value than a fucking modern art painting. I really fucking do.